I have a question for you. What do you reckon would elevate a meal from plain old delicious to a life-altering experience more? Getting into a fist fight or autoerotic asphyxiation? It's not something I think about often, but that's where my mind had drifted while lying awake at 4 o'clock in the morning in a dull Hamilton hotel room, because it's occurred to me that the good things in life always seem to shine brightest after a struggle. I mean, what I found was that after a particularly difficult time, and then being accused of trafficking drugs by a 6.5-foot customs officer with an Uzi at Tel Aviv airport, coming down from the previous evening's bender really did the job for me. That was the welcoming committee on my first visit to Israel, and I really think the brutal lead-up and fraught journey contributed in no small way to my first meal in the Holy Land being one of my most memorable ever, and led me to a hummus epiphany. I was in Hamilton for the New Zealand Food Writers Conference, and that day had been eavesdropping on the keynote speaker of the conference, Pat Norse, telling the other delegates how to construct a story. According to Pat, one of the secrets is putting the James Bond moment at the beginning to draw the reader in. He's the reason I started with the references to drugs, guns, and postulations on the appropriateness of suggesting you engage in a risky self-pleasuring manoeuvre before eating breakfast. As someone who writes recipes for a living, that could take recipe fails to a whole new and potentially litigious level. So, what did I learn? Well, first up, we learnt that the money for paid food writers is drying up, so don't expect to make a living from doing this. We also heard about some of the issues facing sustainable farming in New Zealand, such as the restrictions on nitrogen. Was that runoff or input? I can't recall. And their constantly rising costs. I've thought a lot about farming issues recently, but I started thinking that farmers, like probably a lot of industries, are just convenient scapegoats for environmental damage which on the face of it appears to be caused by them, but actually the root cause is you and me. We want everything for the lowest possible price, which just propels the disposable mindset. It's the same issue facing every aspect of our current economic model. Buy more, make more, more profits, more. Your business has to grow, GDP has to grow. Everyone is driven to continually increase outputs from a finite resource. This can't go on forever. In fact, from what I understand, it can't go on for much longer at all. But I'm drifting off topic. The farmers in the room wanted more balanced coverage, but because the money is drying up for food journalists, they just don't have the time to provide that balance. After a few wines at the end of the day, the conversation got a bit more obscure and smutty. Who knows that Hamilton was famous for being the chlamydia capital of New Zealand until recently? Gisborne now comes first. Plus, Bologna is known not only for its meat sauce, but the quality of the local fellatio as well, which just goes to show that food writers have a very broad range of gustatory knowledge. The second day, we went on a field trip to Raglan, where we visited a bunch of small-scale food producers making all sorts of delicious things, including beer and charcuterie, honey, milk, chocolate milk, coconut yogurt, the list goes on. They were all just so amazingly positive and inspiring and full of energy, which was actually really cool. And Raglan, wow, what a sweet spot. I've never visited before, but was instantly enamoured. Takaka, you'll always be my favourite hippie hideaway, but Raglan, I reckon you're close. The food producer's positivity must have rubbed off a bit on me, because when I learnt the old hotel in Raglan was for sale, I briefly entertained a dream of buying it. If only I had the energy, money, knowledge, skills and inclination to uproot my entire life to do so. Sadly, I possess none of these qualities and have learnt some dreams need nipping in the bud early. Despite being a recipe writer, I hardly ever write anything about my personal beliefs or opinions on food, even though there's a whole world of issues on the subject that I'm keen to explore. I've always dreamed of writing a cookbook, but it's such a formidable task and I'd always struggled to define an idea of what it would be about. It wasn't until recently that I realised I could morph this dream into a different format and just publish one recipe or idea at a time. I started to see video as a really exciting medium for showing recipes in a dynamic way. I mean, written recipes will always have their place, but videos can show so much more detail, and with cool sound effects as well. So, using online tutorials, I started learning how to film and edit recipe videos and took the leap of publishing them on YouTube. I think what held me back for so long was a fear of rejection and exposing myself. Not in the manner my loving partner jokingly advised prior to the conference, which was, do some good schmoozing but keep your dick in your pants. Of course, that's sage advice for anyone, but I'm not in the habit of flopping it out unannounced. Unless, perhaps, we travel to Bologna, my dear. No, it's a fear I think most people have, exposing your personal thoughts, feelings and ideas for others to judge. Regardless of their reactions, it's a scary prospect. So the knowledgeable speakers, hyper-positive food producers of Raglan, and the other conference attendees that were already doing what I wanted to do combined to inspire me to take the next step in my video evolution and start putting words to my ideas and to back myself to put it out there. I was having such a good time talking with these people that I even briefly entertained the idea of going to the casino to watch rugby with some of them to continue these conversations. Despite rugby being a great sleeping aid for me and casinos being the epitome of pure evil. I'm keen to keep exploring video as a way to express my ideas around food, and I've got a few stories to tell as well. Like the contrast between the trials and tribulation of being an overworked chef during a dark and cold Glasgow winter, living in a tent in the front room of an unheated tenement flat, fuelled largely by Guinness, to a sun-soaked kibbutz in the Fertile Crescent, with a heavenly breakfast buffet laden with fresh fruit and vegetables, juices, yogurts, beautiful breads, and the creamiest and most lush hummus I'd ever tasted being one of them. I've also got my hummus recipe pretty close to that magical memory, so maybe I'll share that at the same time.